welcome. I'm Judit Polgar for iChess.net. This is the first time I'm doing a video series in my life, and I'm happy to share it with you. The video series will be more than 15 hours, a big, long course, and it will consist of a lot of different elements of chess. I will show you a lot of things in details in the Sicilian, which I was always a big expert on. I was playing it with the white and the black pieces as well. But it's not only about Sicilian, it's about how to think during a game, what details to look for in a middle game, and how detailed a complicated game can be. I will also share with you some of the greatest moments of my life, which I've played against Gary Kasparov, the biggest secrets in the Sicilian. But also I will not forget to share with you my game against Anand or Shirov, Topalov, Kramnik, or many of the other great, fantastic champions. I will also show you some of my games which I played from very young age, already starting age of 12, when I was playing at the Olympiad in 1988, and we won with my sisters for the first time. So there are a lot of unique moments which I collected in this video series, and I hope you're going to enjoy it. Chapter 1 will consist a couple of games, very special games of mine, and actually it is all against Gary Kasparov, the world champion, starting with my first encounter against him in 1994, and I will share with you the games which I played in 2001 in Linares, which was the most memorable mini match against Kasparov for me. It was only a draw, but we won the brilliancy prize with one of the games.
The fiery Judit Polgar. But one look at her first round masterpiece against Vladimir Ipishin, one of Karpov's seconds, will surely win you over.
Well, it just went everything so smoothly for me. Well, probably somewhere in the opening where he castled, he had to be more careful, I guess.
Bon, tout s'est passé si agréablement pour moi dans cette partie, si facilement. Je pense que quand il a roqué, à ce moment-là, ça a été un peu l'accélération du processus.
No, I mean, it's quite rare that he plays such a game at this level.
But after sparkling play in the early rounds, Polgar's big semi-final matchup with Kasparov fell flat. Here's Gary discussing what might have been.
But there was a very funny trap that, she missed. It was, where I forced an exchange of rooks and organized three-pass pawns. It's in normal game it's easy to find, but in the speed chess and the time trouble, I hope that she would not find that. And
Here's that key moment in the match that Kasparov was talking about. Polgar has the white pieces, rook d7 check, and now this was very clever from Kasparov.
Hi, I'd like to welcome you here together at this video. I'd like to show you my experiences in the Sicilian. Sicilian is something special in my life as I started to work on it and learn about the Sicilian from a very young age. This is an opening which I played from age 6, 7, practically from the very beginning. And actually from my youngsters' years, I was not only playing it with the white color against it, but also I was playing it with the black pieces. So I have a very special feelings about the Sicilian, different openings in the Najdorf, Scheveningen, Pausen. There are different elements of each and every system. But there are a lot of things which is very similar also. And in my video series, I would like to share with you a lot of different patterns and ideas which I've learned already from a very young age. And how did I practice it? I always practiced it with my sisters playing blitz games. Also, I was watching and analyzing a lot of good games by strong players on that specific theme. And also I was solving puzzles and problems. I think generally it's very important in every opening, whatever opening you pick and you would like to play, first check some of the games which was played by champions, very strong players, experts in that opening. This way, you can learn, you can have a feeling for it. What is it about? What kind of structures there are? And then you get a feeling whether you like it or not. And if you're sympathizing with the system, then you can already move on and look into the details. What I would like to share with you in this video is actually my games against Kasparov I played in the Sicilian. We had a long journey, and the first game I'd like to show you, it was played in Linares, 1994, back many, many years ago. I was just 17 years old. This was the first encounter I played against Kasparov. And of course, I knew exactly, and he knew exactly, that it's going to be a Sicilian, because for both of us, this was the most stable and actually the only opening we were playing. Also, Kasparov all his life was playing practically only Sicilian, and it was the same thing in my career. I was playing with the white pieces, so the whole world was watching us. What is going to happen in the big battle for the first time played by me against Gary Kasparov? Linares was clearly considered the Wimbledon of chess at the time. It was the strongest players were playing there, Karpov, Kasparov, Anand, really the top players. So for me, it was very special to compete with the really best players at such a young age. It was also psychologically very difficult. But let's move on the game. Knight f3, d6, d4, c takes d4, knight takes d4. Knight f6, knight c3, a6. This is called the Najdorf. You might be playing it already, or you're thinking about to play the Najdorf, for example. This is, I was playing it with the black pieces a lot, but also with the white pieces I was playing against it. In this position, there are many different alternatives. For example, you can go bishop e3. This is one of the alternatives. Then there's another alternative is bishop g5, which is a very sharp system. But then there are more solid lines, like for example playing g3 and have the fianchetto bishop on bishop g2. This is played usually by players who does not like really the sharp Najdorf. But also I was playing as a kid bishop c4. I played it pretty much and I was kind of successful with it, but this is also can be more solid, but it's not such a great main line. Also a4 is an option, already playing against controlling black to play b5, which I was also playing in my youth time. It was f4. It is also somewhat aiming to the center, control the center, and it's really attacking. But there are other alternatives also, bishop e2, which is also more going into direction to the more solid lines. But eventually, after playing against the Najdorf for more than 20 years, I was also trying out different moves like bishop d3, bishop going to d3. So also bishop d3 was played during my career. Even rook g1 was played by me as well. So there are really a lot of different alternatives in this position. If you try to learn and find a system against the Najdorf, it is really very much advised by me to think what kind of personality you have, whether you like to play not so aggressive, not so much the lines which are you have to make a lot of preparation and you have to memorize a lot of concrete lines. Because of course the Sicilian, in any way, it's going to be kind of tactical and interesting game. But I was playing in this game f4. At the time, this was my main weapon against the Najdorf. Now black has different alternatives also. Black can play e6 as it happened in the game, but the other alternative, which is also played by many people, is e5. e5 was absolutely not Kasparov's character. It simplifies a bit, goes very much in the middle game on structures where the d5 square is a little bit weak. And somehow for Kasparov it was always the main system to going into the Scheveningen, which you will find in different games that from the Najdorf it can transpose to the Scheveningen system. Or later on we are going to discuss different systems like the Pausen, which I was playing a lot and playing it very successfully with the black pieces. All these systems can easily transfer to the Scheveningen system from Najdorf or from the Pausen, even from the Rauser system. So I played bishop e2, bishop e7, castles. Of course, this is a very basic element of every opening to make castle and have your king in safety. Queen c7. This is always a question in the Sicilian, whether to move your queen to c7 or to wait for it. Of course, Queen c7 has different elements and different importance in this opening. One of the main importances that black covers the e5 square, so white's e5 move is not so easy to break through. So this is the main idea behind Queen c7. Queen e1, this is a very typical pattern in the Scheveningen. The white queen is coming to e1 in order to come to g3. The outpost on g3 for the queen, it is very well placed. Knight d7. Black is still not playing castle because he believes that he has more important things to do. Still, knight bd7, it has different ideas behind it. Primary is again against e5. That simply black is preparing every possible way to prevent me playing e5, because that can really make a lot of problems to black. But also knight bd7, it has also another idea. First of all, if it wants to develop longer, move on with knight c5, putting pressure on the e4 pawn. But also, of course, in generally, we can talk about it that black has two alternatives for the knight, either knight c6 or knight d7. This is also a matter of style. Knight bd7 was more of Kasparov's play, because also later on he would want to move with the pawn to b5 or b6 and to develop his bishop to b7. In this way, the knight will be not in the way. I played a4. It's also very typical patterns in the Sicilian, no matter whether we're talking about the Najdorf, Pausen or Scheveningen, you're always going to find this move alternating. Of course, in some games, white is allowing black to play b5, if I wouldn't play a4, but with this a4 move, I'm preventing the move b5. In other hand, of course, white is giving up some things, because here, after a4, we can say that the b4 square is a weak spot. In other hand, a4, it doesn't have only the advantage of stopping black to play b5, but also I'm planning to play a5 and to gain space advantage. This is the reason where most of the time, or many of the occasions, you will find where white is playing a4, black is playing reacting immediately with b6. The reason is really because white was planning to go a5. And with b6, it happens also that in many moves, when you make a good move, usually it's not only a good move by itself, but because it's not only defending, but it's helping your other piece to develop. This is exactly the case here. After b6, black prevented white to play a5, the a5 move, but in the other hand, it's making space for black's bishop on b7, and it's going to be the most excellent place for black. I played bishop f3. This is also a very common idea, because the main idea, you can think for a second, what would be my next move if white would be on move? You can pause for a short time and say to yourself that what is white's threat here? Exactly. It is e5 which is the threat in this position, because the white bishop's diagonal would attack the rook on a8 and the pawn would attack after e5 the knight on f6. So this makes the very logical reaction by black. As he played b6, he played bishop b7, the continuation of the development. In the Sicilian also it's very important where white plays f4. I've played f4, right? Which means that the diagonal on the black squares is kind of weakened, or at least there can be a moment in the game when it can be a problem on that diagonal. This is why it's also very typical pattern to go king h1. You will also find this in many of the experts playing this move, just in case you go out from the g1 a7 diagonal. Rook d8. To tell you the truth, I was kind of surprised on this move during the game, because usually the rook's place is on c8 in the Sicilian, in these kind of positions. It's a fact, and actually in this game also eventually Kasparov will move his rook to the c5. But for the moment, still without castling, Gary was playing rook d8. In the long run, of course, I understood that his idea was, first of all, to confuse me a little bit, to get me out of book, and also it's an idea later on black wants to go d5, of course. Bishop e3, I developed with my bishop, so both of my bishop is developed. It's also, I can say that you will find very rarely games where bishop on d2 would be standing well. In this system, bishop's place is really on e3. Why? It is because later on it can attack the b6 pawn. That's one of the reasons. And the other reason is because it's protecting the d4 knight, which is also very important. And generally speaking, this diagonal is very valuable and very important for both colors, but it's very clear that white is really controlling that at the moment. Finally, Kasparov played castle. Queen g3, as I said before, it is really the best post for the queen in these Scheveningen systems. The first idea is that I put pressure on the g7 pawn, as later on you will see how I take advantage of my queen. But also it's very important that one day if I want to go e5, I support it not only with my pawn on f4, but also with my queen. Black played knight c5. This is again a very, very important moment, because black is really putting a lot of pressure on the pawn on e4, right? The knight on f6 is attacking the e4 pawn. Also the other black knight on c5 is controlling. And the bishop on b7 is also attacking the e4. So now I have two alternatives. It's either to play e5 in this position to move my pawn. In this case, knight fe4 would be possible and black would be very comfortable in this position. This is why my idea was to play f5, which is a very typical idea again in the Sicilian, in this kind of positions, to attack on the e6 square. In later videos, we will talk about it more. Here, black's move is the most obvious one, what Kasparov played, e5 immediately. After the move e5, my knight is also attacked and the e4 pawn is still under attack. So I have to make an intermediate move by playing bishop h6, and I can do this because of my g3 queen. So black cannot take the bishop. Black plays knight e8, but this means that my e4 pawn is released from the attack. Knight b3. Now black has a choice whether to move the knight or not to move the knight. Black played knight d7. It would be not very much advised for black to take knight takes b3, because after c b3 the rook would be coming on the c file and it would be quite unpleasant for black. So Kasparov played knight d7. He wanted to keep the tension. He wanted to keep the most possible pieces on the board, so eventually to get the initiative. As my bishop is not under attack, I still have move and time to develop with my pieces. I played rook d1. Black played king h8. This is exactly how you make my bishop to move away. Bishop e3. Again, I'm putting pressure on the b6 square. Black is playing knight ef6 as it doesn't have to defend the g7 pawn anymore. Black wants to be very active, and later on he might be thinking to play d5, which is a very typical breakthrough in such cases. As my g3 queen is not really making use anymore, I played queen f2 for two reasons. First of all, to open the way for my g2 pawn, possibly to play g4, as I was always a very aggressive player, but also to put pressure, more pressure on the b6 pawn. Black played rook fe8. Black is preparing, and continuously with every move, in his next move, Kasparov will be preparing the move d5, the breakthrough for black. It's a very typical breakthrough, but you have to make a lot of preparation and great timing. I played rook fe1, though I think g4 might be an interesting try, but I also was kind of careful against Kasparov. But still, it's a very balanced position. I played rook e1 in order for later times if I have problem on the e file or I have to defend my pawn on e4. So I would be able to do so by moving the bishop. So black played bishop f8 in this position. After bishop f8, the idea is black opens up the e file for the rook to open, as later on black will be playing or would like to play d5, and the e8 rook can be very important in those kind of situations. I played bishop g5 in order to be more active and give the pin for the knight on f6, h6. I was also kind of provoking Kasparov to play h6, weaken his king. Bishop h4. Rook c8. It was also a very logical play, as the knight couldn't be moving, but also not only that, but the rook on c8, generally speaking, is the right square for the black play. And you can see now the two rooks on c8 and e8. Most of the time these are the best locations for the rooks in such a cases for black. To be honest, I started to get confused a bit, that I didn't find a plan for myself, but I saw that Kasparov, with move by move, playing rook e8, bishop f8, going to rook c8, he was kind of improving his position. So somewhere here I simply got lost. But I want to show you how Kasparov really outplayed me in a few moves. After queen f1, I wanted to make space for my bishop, from h4 possibly to move back, but also to put a little pressure on the a6 pawn. Black played bishop e7, as he decided that he wants to make it a little bit different planning. Maneuvering is something very important in such positions as well, that you simply follow your opponent's move, but it's very important to keep your pieces on good located squares. Now, as I moved away my queen, the h4 bishop can be under attack. If, let's say, the f6 knight would be jumping, it's unprotected. So this is why Kasparov played bishop e7. And here I was not sure how to continue, and I made a mistake. I played knight d2. Actually, I wanted to stop black playing queen c4 possibly, because this is also something black can be thinking of. And I played knight d2, and black played queen c5 in this position. This was a very strong move. Very strong move. And as I was hesitant during the game how to continue, I played knight b3 back. And of course, Kasparov was not repeating moves by moving back with the queen to c7, but he played queen b4, which is a very important moment, I think. So you understand that in the beginning, when I played a4 with white, this is the reason when eventually later on it can cause problems. And the queen on b4 at this point, it stands extremely well. It's the best located place for the queen because I cannot attack it, which is extremely important. But black has a lot of different ideas having his queen on b2. My knight on b3 cannot be moved as the b2 pawn would be hanging. My c3 knight cannot be moved really because the a4 pawn is under attack and also the c2. It is also very important that black has the open c5 for the rook. So there are a lot of different alternatives, and also knight c5 is really, really threatening at this point. After knight c5, it would be very strong idea for black, because to get away my b3 knight, my position would fall apart. So I played bishop e2. I gave up the e4 pawn, which is actually, we can say that the e4 pawn is the heart of the position for white. And after exchanging the e4 pawn, exchanging some of the pieces, I gained back the pawn on a6. I played bishop f3 first, attacking the knight, but opening the line for my queen as well, so I would be able to grab on a6. Knight f6. On f6, black knight is extremely well placed, because now black will be planning to play e4. I took queen takes a6. It's a fact that I gained back the material and now it's equal pawns, but it's a big difference that I lost my central pawn and I got in exchange an a6 pawn in return. Now black played rook e8 and black has fantastic pieces. The knight on d7, knight on f6, the open file for the rook on the c5. So everything is practically fantastically placed for black. This is the game I wanted to show you that simply practically without noticing, I was outplayed in the middle game. This is why it's important to know and actually feel the moments where the place location is important for white and for black. And most of the time, who understands the middle game better will take the advantage and win the game. Now I want to show you my other game against Kasparov. In the meantime, we were playing many different games, but in the Sicilian, 16 years later in 2000, Kasparov was white. I was playing with the black pieces in Vacanze, which was considered before and even now one of the top tournaments. This was the last round actually, and the interesting thing was that Kasparov won the tournament already, no matter what will be the last game, the outcome of it. But it was a very interesting game, and in this game I decided a different strategy against Kasparov compared to my previous games with him. It was also a Sicilian. It was very clear that both of us were kind of expecting Sicilian, even though Kasparov played time to time against me d4 and not the starting move e4. I was very happy because I had my idea and strategy. We are moving quickly because we know that this is the basic of the Najdorf. And it was very clear that Kasparov will be playing bishop e3, as this is the line he was playing at the time. It is one of the most sharp system against the English and against the Najdorf. This is going to be an English attack if white will be playing f3 as well. I will show you later on those kind of games and systems as well. But here the interesting thing is that black came out, I think, in the 90s with the move knight g4, which was before played with many top players before, like Polugajevsky was one of the person, a huge expert on the Najdorf, and he was playing knight g4 as well. But when Kasparov started to play knight g4 himself with the black pieces, he brought a lot of new ideas into it with a lot of energy what he has, and of course very deep ideas and analysis he showed in his game. So my idea was that I will be using the system what he is playing himself. So how is he going to react with the white pieces? And I found out that it was kind of uncomfortable for him. So this strategy that I was using his own weapon against him, it confused him a bit. Bishop g5, h6, bishop h4. This is how the line goes. And black idea is to go g5, straight attacking the h4 bishop. In one hand, black is very aggressive, and by making a move with a tempo, next move black will be developing with his or her bishop. In this case, I was playing with black. But it also gives weaknesses for black. Bishop g3, bishop g7. In this position, it's very important that suddenly I can feel, you should feel, that black is at least as developed as white. Black is immediately attacking the d4 knight, is putting pressure, and the g4 knight we can hesitate whether is it active or is it misplaced, but it will have later on opportunities where to go and replace it. Now white has different alternatives. h3 was played by Kasparov. Immediately straightforward asking my knight whether I want to go back to f6 or e5. And actually there is a big difference between the two moves. In this game I played knight f6, but in our next game, which I'm going to show you, I choose the move knight e5 instead. This is an idea which I prepared for the game, and I knew that it's going to be very sharp. Bishop c4. White is developing with the pieces, and white would like to castle short in order to make an active play. Queen b6. This was my idea, that immediately putting pressure on the d4 knight, and the b2 pawn is actually under attack immediately, and also the d4 knight can be having a little problem if I'm jumping away with my knight from f6. White played short castle. I also played castle because for the moment I wanted to have my king on safety. Now black is already threatening to either to take on b2 or also to jump with the knight possibly to e4 and make an open diagonal for the bishop on g7, and the d4 knight could be also under attack. So Kasparov played the move knight de2, going away with the knight, so it's not going to be under attack. But still the b2 pawn is possible to grab. By taking the pawn on b2, it was a natural continuation after queen b6. So if you say A, you should say B as well. Of course, I understood that again, white has advantage in development. This is the price he paid for the pawn. Bishop b3. The bishop b3 move, what was played by Kasparov, it has different aspects. First of all, the bishop on b3 stands better than on c4 because it has a safety spot. But also it wants to tell to my queen that if I wouldn't run away with my queen, then white would be able to play a3 and my queen would be trapped afterwards. So black has to be careful. Black has to be careful in such positions for the queen after taking so-called poisoned pawn on b2. I was playing queen a3. It is very important to run out from the danger with the black queen. And of course, if I will be able to develop properly, then I keep the pawn up and I will have a good position. But on the other hand, the bishop on b3 is really like a blade on the a2, g8 diagonal. And also we should never forget that the g6 and the h7 squares are really weak due to my h6 and g5 play in the opening. Very clearly, white should be fast also, because if I would develop, then I would be getting away with the pawn up. f4, very straightforward. It is a very, very sharp game. It's very clear. In such a position, I wouldn't like to exchange the g5 pawn to f4, because then it would be really even a better version for white. So I would just keep moving, developing with knight c6, as I understood that for the moment I'm safe. White played king h1. Again, you will see that even though this position is very sharp, very concrete, still the move king h1 is simply extremely important. And you will find it in most of the Sicilian games that in one way or another, king h1, when white castles short and played f4 when the diagonal of a7 and g1 is open, it is something that white will move out on h1, because if you have the time, you should be moving it, because in the long run, don't get any unexpected checks on that diagonal. It's important. I played bishop e6. I wanted desperately to exchange the b3 bishop, which we talked about, how dangerous it can be. I don't really care if it would be an exchange and I would get a double pawn on the e5. Now, how to continue with white? Because white understands that we understand both, while I was playing with black, that white has the initiative and he has to keep the initiative to put a lot of pressure on my position. Queen d3. Though, to be honest, I really felt very comfortable in this position, and black is kind of at least okay. I played rook c8 as I was sure that the rook on c8 stands very good. It is also the rook on c8 most often is the right place for the a8 rook to be moved in the Sicilian positions. But also it's important in here where the queen on a3 that to bring back queen c5 is always something to consider, because the queen is a very important piece. White played f takes g5, h takes g5, and knight d5. Very much straightforward already. Now this is the point somewhere where I was still okay, but of course I was spending a lot of time and the danger was always there. But I still felt comfortable. I played rook f8 in this position, protecting the e7 pawn. It was very important in order if I want to move with my knight. But in the other hand, I should also think about how to have safety and defend my king side. And this is going to be the big question. Rook a d1. I played knight b4. I was very much looking forward to exchange the d5 knight, as it was really bothering me. And in this position, actually, Kasparov could play queen e3, which was probably a better move than what he played. He played queen, because here he would immediately put pressure on the g5 pawn. He played queen f3 because he was more focused on the f file and he really wanted to put pressure. We shouldn't forget that, of course, whatever the result would be, he would still win the tournament, but he's a great fighter and he was free to play, but he definitely wanted to crush me. That's his way of being. I played knight bd5. And now, after e takes d5, we can say that the b3 bishop is really out of play, right? The white bishop on the queen side. It is out of play, but on the other hand, also after e takes d5, black has to move back bishop to d7. Now the f5 square is weak, but also after e takes d5, there's another diagonal where the bishop could be helpful. You may think of it, what kind of move, a small, quiet move was played by Kasparov to improve his piece play. He played c3, and the move c3 was, if I remember well, I was also kind of surprised or unexpected, because I thought my position is still okay, but this was actually the critical moment when I really lost the thread. As bishop from b3 going to come to c2, and this diagonal, the b187 diagonal, is really powerful. This bishop is much stronger if it reaches this diagonal than it was on b3. And I thought I have time for kind of all kind of counter-attack on the queen side, and I played e5. This was not the best move. Bishop b5 should have been played possibly. But there were a lot of different alternatives in other hand for black also. White played queen d3. He wanted to stop me also playing bishop b5 from d7. I played a4, bishop c2, and queen c5. And here it's interesting that somehow I had the feeling that probably I'm getting away, and suddenly Kasparov made a sacrifice which was very unexpected. I had the feeling that this is his plan and he couldn't resist to this sacrifice, and in this position, if he wouldn't have this sacrifice, it's clearly black would be absolutely fine. White played rook f6. It is a very difficult decision how to capture such a piece sacrifice, to take with the pawn or to take with the bishop. It is also many times the case that you have to calculate all these lines in details. In other hand, when the lines are too complicated, you have to make a decision by your intuition. I made my intuition and played e takes f6 because somehow after bishop f6, it was very dangerous lines, queen h7, king f8. I didn't see exactly how I'm going to be killed in this position, but there are many different alternatives. Starting from a simple move like queen h6, bishop g7, queen g5, and later on the rook can be coming to the f5, for example. But also there are a lot of strange tactical ideas like knight f4 and a lot of concrete tactics. But even h4 is a fantastic idea to try to move away the g5 pawn. And if I would be taking the pawn on h4, which would be not advised, then bishop f4, and on black squares I would be possibly losing. So I had the feeling that it's much better if I take with the pawn. Why? Because I open up the line for my rook, so it can be defending, and also I thought that rook on e5 can be giving back the rook. It can be somehow saving the game. And actually e takes f6 was a better move. We have to understand that Kasparov is not winning, it's just extremely dangerous for black. And also I started to have short on time. Knight d4, so actually it's a positional sacrifice. My king is kind of safe for the moment, but my bishop was on g7 is like a pawn, right? And if white would be reaching out to the f5 square with the knight, and if he eliminates the white square bishop first, then it's just a dead lost position for me, because also the d6 pawn, which is extremely important for white, and now the bishop from g3 attacks so strong. This is why my next move was rook e5 to block it. And after bishop e5, I played f takes e5. Here I thought that maybe I'm going to be surviving it, but I had the feeling that next move which was coming, that it can be very painful for me. And white played knight e6. It was a very strong attacking sacrifice. Actually, it's not really a sacrifice, as if I would be playing f takes e6, then white is simply playing rook f1 and I get mate in a few moves. So I played bishop e6, d takes e6. We have to understand that different color bishops is a very special, different game from everything else. And we are going to have a special chapter on this in Endgame also, that how powerful different color bishop can be. One bishop can verse much more than the other one, even though in principle it has the same value. Now I want to go back to see the last few moves of the game. It's not relevant to the opening, but I want to show you how precise you have to be to win a game, even when it's winning. I played rook c7, rook c7. Now white played bishop a4. It seems like an easy move, taking the pawn, but the key element will be when bishop will be playing bishop will go to d7. I played d5, trying to cover the white squares a bit. Kasparov played queen f5, wanted to go bishop d7 next, which he's going to make, but I thought I'm clever and I go queen f4, protecting the f7 mate. Queen b1, I really love this move, not during the game, but I like these moves when you have different attacks and threats by making a move. White wants to go queen b6 optionally, attack my rook, but the main and the killing threat is really rook f1. And I can't really defend myself against it. I played f takes e6, where you might think at first that rook f1 would be winning the queen, but actually Kasparov was much more brutal than that. For him it was much more important to take my pawns, control the white squares all over, and I could keep my queen, but I lost different pawns of mine, and the biggest problem is not that I have a pawn down, but that my king is so much unprotected in the center. I played rook d7, c4, queen e3, now not on the b file, but he went back to h7, again attacking me very heavily, king d8, rook b1. This b1 square was important for Kasparov for the queen, but now for the rook that he puts pressure on, the b7, now he's threatening queen g8, check, and then after queen c7, the b7 would be lost. Bishop e6, rook e7, bishop g4, rook f7 I played, check, queen d4, queen g6, and I resigned in this position after queen g6. This game was very special for me because I felt that in the middle game I was really playing a real battle against Kasparov, and this was a small change in my games against him. After this, my next encounter was in Linares 2011, which will be the next game I'm going to show you, which really broke my relationship on the chessboard with Kasparov. This time I want to share with you a new game of mine against Kasparov from 2001. It was played also again in Linares. I had a feeling after the game in 2000, what I played, which I just showed you previously, that I found the right strategy against Kasparov to use his own weapon against him. So let's see how it was in this game. Of course, it was another Najdorf, and as we talked about it, here white has many alternatives, but Kasparov is very much focused on the straightforward, aggressive lines. Again, I played knight g4, bishop g5, h6, bishop h4, g5, bishop g3, bishop g7. In this position, as we talked about it previously, white has three alternatives here. The most common is h3, and that's what was played by Kasparov, but I want to show you that the other move is knight f5. It was played against Kasparov also quite a few times, but practically I can say that it's very close to a forced draw. Instead of knight f5, and if not h3, bishop e2 is another move which is pretty common, or at the time it was very common. I also had games with the white pieces and with the black pieces again. And in this position, black would be playing h5, defending the knight. And in many cases, many games, white would be taking on g4, where h takes g4 is the best move according to me, but bishop g4 is also possible. It also very much developed, it has a very serious theory, thanks to Kasparov mainly. So let's go back to the game h3. And in this game, I choose the different continuation. In the previous game, I went knight f6 with a lot of complications, and I felt that I could have improved that game, and I was quite okay with black. But I thought this time I would go knight e5, which is not just another move, but it gives a different feeling for the position. It drives the game in a more positional directions. So it was much more psychological, my decision, by making this move. I wanted to play against Kasparov in a long game where it's not so sharp with the black pieces. Now white played f3. It is not the only move, but it is very much advised that as the g3 bishop, we have to understand that if the bishop would be standing, let's say, on e3, white would have a great advantage. But white has this g3 bishop, and it's not only that it is badly placed, but it's also the d4 knight, which can get in trouble after queen b6 kind of moves. So f3 kind of a very logical continuation from white side, because the bishop is ready already, starting from next move to play bishop f2, and already protecting the d4 knight also. But generally speaking, also it stands better for different reasons. I played knight c6, immediately putting pressure on the d4 knight, so white has to decide whether to move it. Then it would be a great success for black. But obviously, after f3, white played bishop f2, so if I would be taking the knight on d4, let's say eventually, then white is able to take it back with the bishop. I played bishop e6. This is all theory, but it is possible to play actually knight d4 exchange first and then bishop e6. It's matter of taste in one hand. In other hand, it's also, as I'm not afraid of knight takes e6 in this position, because if after knight e6, f takes e6, we have to talk about this position, because after f takes e6, in one hand, white can say that he has the pair of bishop, which can be very strong, and we have to respect it very much. But, and in other hand, black has a double pawn structure on the e5. But in other hand, we have to know that the bishop on g7 is like a blade. It's like so strong that you cannot compare it to any other piece. The e5 knight is standing outstanding. It's a fantastic place for the knight. And actually the double pawns, we cannot say that it's so bad for black, because the e6 pawn is actually covering the d5 square from the possibility for white knight from c3 to jump over there. So actually it is something black is really active, and we can say that black is more developed as well. So knight e6 is not something black would be worried about. In this case, why should I take on d4 immediately? This was my kind of psychological thinking. Queen d2. In these positions, almost all the time, white is castling to the long side in these structures. Mainly because if black will be castling for the short side, white wants to make attack on the king's side. Now again, it wouldn't be necessary for black to exchange the d4 knight already. It's still possible to play queen a5, but in this case, black should take in account that knight b3 is an alternative. As I didn't mind at all to exchange the knight already, I did it in this situation. Bishop d4. Now, it's very clear that more or less both sides are playing very solid. We are both making our developing moves. Now, for black, we cannot say that castling is a priority, which is kind of strange because that's what we usually say, that after developing your light pieces, then really you should take care about your king. But in the Sicilian, you have to think about all your pieces. You have to think about your A8 rook, where it stands the best, and sometimes it goes to C8 before you castle. Or we can think about the queen on D8, as we saw in my game against Kasparov from 94, where he developed the queen to C7 first. So here again, for me and in this line, it is very important to develop pieces. For example, if rook c8 is also an alternative, actually many people like to do this. In this case, for example, knight d5 is an extra alternative for white, or as it can happen in many times in different openings, but in the Sicilian as well, if white would be going long castle and black plays queen a5, it can be transposition as well. But actually the main idea I play queen a5 is, first of all, it's a very active square for the queen. But the concrete idea is that the a2 pawn is going to be under attack. So for example, after queen a5, long castle would be not possible because I would just grab the pawn on a2. So actually it's a very concrete idea to play queen a5 to stop white from the immediate castling. White has different options to continue. Also, for example, h4 is a typical move in this position to open up a bit on the king side. So this is also kind of a disadvantage for black, played g5 at very early stage of the game, that possibly white can break it up. Also, another alternative is also very typical pattern you have to be careful and pay attention to is queen f2, where the white bishop tries to get to b6 and attack the queen. It is not so dangerous at the moment for black, so I was not really much afraid of that. But my opponent Kasparov played a3. It is a very logical continuation, as after castling, a3 will be useful in different ways. First of all, it's not going to be possible to take it with the bishop, but also the b4 square can be an important square for the queen, so it's a very natural move to play a3. Rook g8. This is something you might consider that it's not so logical because you would like to make your king into safety, but the problem is black's king is not necessarily safer on g8 because of the pawn structure on the g5. The idea is behind rook g8 is kind of simple, or at least it's very logical, to defend the g7 bishop. So my e5 knight will be able to jump away and exchange the bishops. Now again, for example, if queen f2, then already bishop b6 would be a threat, so that white would be trapping the queen. But I would be going knight g6, already offering the exchange of the bishops, and white cannot go to bishop b6 because then already bishop c3 would be in the replying by black. And if, let's say, white is exchanging on g7, then rook g7 and the black squares are very weak, and for black it is very comfortable to be on e5 with the queen or with the knight. So black has a very nice position.